I've got Michael Anissimov here today, and we're just about to do an interview. Michael is from the Singularity Institute, and I'll ask Michael, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. I'm Michael Anissimov. I'm the media director for Singularity Institute, and I'm a co-organizer of the Singularity Summit. And I work for the Singularity Institute, which is a artificial intelligence and singularity-oriented research group, and kind of a public advocate for discussion of the singularity and related areas such as existential risk, artificial general intelligence, superintelligence in general, and the concept of the intelligence explosion. So we aim to be a place that facilitates discussion around that and also supports in-house researchers doing work in these areas. And we have a spin-off group that's focusing on rationality, which is a side group of the Singularity Institute that's turning into its own independent nonprofit.
Less wrong.
Yeah, actually, the particular institute is going to be called CMR, Center for Modern Rationality. It's not incorporated yet; it's just a name right now. But
Cool.
yeah, it's going to be based on Less Wrong, but kind of an additional separate entity to Less Wrong and Singularity Institute.
Oh, cool. I didn't know about that. All right. Well, what is the singularity exactly? What does it mean?
The singularity is when someone builds a cyborg or artificial intelligence that is generally more intelligent than any human that has ever lived. And by generally more intelligent, I mean better problem solving capability and creativity across a wide diversity of domains. So cross domain general intelligence rather than a specialized general intelligence. And one of the definitions of the original definition is Werner Vinge's definition, which he gave in a 1993 article that was presented at a NASA conference, and it's called the coming technological singularity. And the way that he defined the term is the creation of greater than human intelligence. So the creation of an intelligence that is more capable or greater, which is the term left open to interpretation. It needs to be substantiated, but greater than human intelligence. And I also, so that's the original coinage. And then another definition that I like is Oxford philosopher Nick Bostrom's definition of a superintelligence, which I think is basically, in the context of the singularity, as I understand it, those two are the same, the creation of superintelligence and the singularity. So he describes the superintelligence as, quote, an intellect that is much smarter than the best human brains in practically every field, including scientific creativity, general wisdom, and social skills. And he notes that the definition leaves open of how the superintelligence is implemented. It could be a digital computer, ensemble of networked computers, cultured cortical tissue, or what have you. It also leaves open whether the superintelligence is conscious and has subjective experiences. So those two pieces, the original Vinge definition and Nick Bostrom's superintelligence definition, I see that as the core documents defining the singularity and superintelligence give those definitions, and I like to stick to the original documents when referring to the singularity concept, so that it's very precise and we don't conflate it with any other ideas that are related but not the same.
People often confuse some of the things that Ray Kurzweil says as the singularity, like accelerating change. Is the accelerating change the singularity? If it's not, what's the difference?
I don't think accelerating change is the singularity in the Werner Vinge or Nick Bostrom superintelligence definition sense. And I think that there might have been earlier periods in history where there was acceleration. Kurzweil argues that the acceleration and the tempo of acceleration is highest right now. I find that a very interesting concept to debate, but for the purposes of describing the singularity itself, I like to stick to those original definitions of greater than human intelligence. And I can imagine a scenario where a greater than human intelligence is created even when technology is slowing down or stopping or just staying at the same level, because it's a specific event like inventing a nuclear reactor or a specific technological event, and it's more likely to occur when progress is accelerating. But I think that acceleration of technology is it's an important enough concept in its own right that it deserves independent analysis, not necessarily conflating with the Werner-Vinge definition. And I like the work that's done by John Smart of the Acceleration Studies Foundation. He looks at acceleration of technological change in a really broad context of information theoretic complexity and acceleration of various metrics beyond just technology. So I think that's important and interesting, but a separate area.
Yeah, I just spoke to John Smart just then, actually. Yeah, he's a great guy. So the accelerating change isn't the singularity. A singularity may be more probable if there's accelerating change preceding it, perhaps. But often people get confused and say, "Hey, there's already been a singularity. Look at the Industrial Revolution, and look at the rise of language within the animal kingdom or the human race." And
Yeah.
people think that these are the same sorts of singularities that we're discussing when we're talking about a technological singularity or an intelligence explosion.
Yeah, I think that all of those constituent concepts are really interesting, but one of like the necessities of true intellectual like dialogue is to refer to exactly what it is you're talking about and be really specific instead of like saying, "Oh, it's all the same," because it's not the same. Like
Mm,
things should be broken down and analyzed separately, and that's really important, especially with these cutting edge, complicated ideas.
exactly. So, is there a substantial chance that we'll significantly enhance human intelligence by 2050?
I think that there definitely is because of progress in brain-computer interfaces. For instance, the recent Berkeley mind reading demonstration, they were able to read the visual input of people watching YouTube videos with a fMRI machine, which is really impressive. And also advances in computational neuroscience, like the scale of simulated cortical networks and other attempts to simulate parts of what the brain does. That's coming along really fast, especially in the last 10 years, because the speed of computers finally got, the speed and memory factors finally got to a level where extremely complex neural simulations are possible. So seeing like the progress that's happened in the last 20 years, which is extremely impressive, I wouldn't be surprised if we were able to create brain implants that could closely interoperate with the brain itself in an orderly fashion in the next 40 years. Like 40 years is a really long time. 40 years ago was 1970. If you look at the technology we have today compared to then, it's a massive difference, especially in areas of like biotech and other information hungry fields. And we already have demonstrated basic brain computer interfaces. For instance, a the brain computer interface that was able to function as a hippocampus in rodents is an example of a successfully demonstrated brain computer interface. So I think that it's a huge discussion, and it could be discussed for hours. The plausibility of the enhancement of human intelligence by 2050, and it can't be summarized like in a 10 or 20-minute discussion. It has to be fleshed out in detail to get any good probability estimate. And to say it's certain is wrong. To say it's certainly not possible is also wrong. It's somewhere in between, as always.
Mm, yeah. Do you think we'll be able to significantly enhance human intelligence through the use of medication and drugs, and without actual interfacing with technology or brain-computer interfaces?
I'm really skeptical that that will be possible in any profound way, because the evolution has already highly optimized the human brain over a long period of time. If there were ways to improve the brain with the introduction of one chemical, it's plausible that without downsides, it's plausible that evolution would have eventually stumbled across that aspect of brain chemistry. There's a lot that can't evolve. There are a lot of constraints on the chemical content and makeup of a organism. Like caffeine is an example of one thing that can speed people up and make them more focused, but it also has downsides. I think the jury's still out on whether like drugs could be used to improve human intelligence. I think it's worth experimenting with, but I think of drugs as like a kind of a shotgun blast because it's one type of chemical being distributed to the entire brain at once. There's no specificity involved, or it's very limited specificity. So I'm skeptical that we'll be able to enhance the human intellect with drugs.
So, well, if human level AI, or actually a question before that is, if there is substantial chance, do you think there will be substantial chance that we'll be able to create a human level AI before 2050?
I do think that there is, and part of the reason connects back to the size of neural simulation networks that already exist. Most of our simulations of brains are actually pretty. The neurons themselves are very simplistic. That are simulated. They're generally point neurons, whereas neurons in the human brain are complex and have thousands of dendrites and are susceptible to various like neurotransmitter concentrations. Those dynamics haven't been simulated in a simulation whatsoever, but we have created highly parallel processing networks that are similar in some ways to cognition in the sense that I think is most important, which is parallelism. Um, our computers are powerful enough that we've been able to solve a lot of AI problems just by throwing massive amounts of computing power at them. For instance, translation. Google Translate, it doesn't translate by using like syntactical models or linguistic models. It just does probability estimates based on corpuses, millions of pages of data, and that are where there are known translations. So it just builds statistical models through the data input and is able to actually ends up being an excellent translator. It's a similar technique that's used for the robot cars, as far as I understand, is throwing massive amounts of data and building statistical models that they don't necessarily have to be that smart because so much data is flowing in and being analyzed that the influx of data can make up for a lack of subtlety or even effectiveness in the processing algorithms. So I think that there'll be a few. I basically think that intelligence is just going to end up being like every other thing in nature we've been able to figure out the basics of so far. Like we figured out the basics of celestial mechanics, we figured out the basics of biology and how the central dogma of biology and how gene transcription works and all those factors. And I think that we'll just come up with a general theory, and that combined with great computational power that we'll have in maybe just a few decades will be enough to create human level AI. And it's because I also you can estimate the complexity of the brain by running a few numbers and things like that. And ultimately, it's a huge argument, and there's a lot of evidence on both sides.
Yeah, it's interesting. Werner Vinge had quoted that was asked, "Will AI reach human level?" And he said yes, but only briefly. Which is like saying that if it did reach human level of intelligence, it's likely to shoot past that very quickly. Um, so, but getting back to what you said, I agree. We've got a lot of data now. I think what we're trying to do is consolidate it, and the algorithms, the machine learning algorithms to process this data are just going to get better and better. I'd like to ask, do you know much about what Henry Markram's doing at IBM?
Yeah, I followed his work.
Okay, what do you think that that's going to bear fruit?
No, I think that is. I'm skeptical about the potential of that project because I think that they claim that they're simulating a brain. Henry Markram, he right now he's working on a single cortical macrocolumn, which is a unit of the brain that is repeated many times throughout the brain. He's trying to simulate one of those. I think it has maybe like 10,000 neurons, somewhere in that neighborhood. But as far as I know, most of these neural simulations are just point neurons, which are very they're like one line of mathematical code represents a neuron. And that's not the way that neurons actually work in the brain. So it's kind of like they're somewhat trying to copy superficial aspects of how the brain works. But I don't think that I think that it's not about the neurons or like putting enough neurons together. It's about the algorithms that run information through those networks. And I think that there's somewhat of a cargo cult mentality. Like if we build it, it will come. Like if we build enough, like a interconnected enough neural network that can learn, then no matter what the starting conditions are, it will figure out how to become intelligent if we put enough of it together. And I'm skeptical of that point of view. I've seen a lot of progress through like mathematical AI and machine learning, and not a lot of progress in actual problems through simulating brains.
Yeah, that was my next question. Do you think there's going to be more fruit born through neuroscience or from mathematical models? So do you think we can borrow from both sides? Like, can we get much out of the neuroscience and sort of wed that and sort of at least help us inform how to go about doing the mathematics?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think that every person involved in artificial intelligence should spend at least a year or two of their education, if not more, like studying neuroanatomy in great detail, simply to become familiar with the level of complexity that the brain has to implement intelligence. Respect for the complexity of the brain is in order, even though I think that we'll eventually be able to break down what the brain does into like a series of algorithms that we can write down on a piece of paper. I still think that it's extremely complex. We don't know how complex those algorithms will be. I think that they'll be less complex than the whole brain itself, which is 100 billion neurons. So it won't be 100 billion pages of code, but it'll be complex. And if we just are too stupid to figure out how intelligence works, then we'll eventually figure out how it works by copying the brain. So it's kind of like if we fail, then that will come to save the day in terms of getting us to AI eventually. And it's very difficult to predict. You know, geniuses will work away at this, and only they'll even notice if they start to make breakthroughs.
Excellent. So Marcus Hutter is coming to speak at the Singularity Summit in Australia later this year.
Mhm.
Have you followed much of the approximation attempts at AIXI?
I scanned the paper that came out about the AICTL, which is a time space limited version of AIXE. Um, for those that aren't familiar, AIXE, which is AIXI, it's a notation that stands for a decision theory coupled together with Solomonoff induction, which is a widely used form of inference in artificial intelligence, coupled with a simple decision engine that picks actions based on maximizing expected future reward of a utility function, which is left unspecified. Um, I think that that kind of research is basic research, and it's kind of like building a huge particle accelerator to work on physics. You can't predict exactly if it will bear fruit, but when it does, there could be like spectacular breakthroughs. That's why like we put hundreds of billions of dollars towards physics research around the world, not because like it pays off right away, like building a bridge does or whatever, but because when it does pay off, it's a really big deal. And I think that this kind of research is kind of like that, but with respect to artificial intelligence.
Okay, so if human level AI is created, is there a good chance that vastly superhuman AI will follow in an intelligent explosion?
Yeah, I think there is a good chance of that, and the reason why is because human level intelligence, we're the first intelligent species to gain enough intelligence to work and cooperate in groups of greater than like 150. And it seems that our capability for complex social interaction, which is what a lot of evolutionary folks and anthropologists, they think that the predominant theory is that social cognition is what was responsible for the runaway expansion of the human brain, dealing with complex social situations. So we're the first animal to be able to operate in packs, the first intelligent animal, especially, to be able to operate in groups of greater than 150. We're the first intelligent animal to be able to write things down. There's a lot of things that humans can do that no other animal can. So it seems like we crossed a really important threshold, but it's important to remember that our immediate evolutionary descendants lacked a lot of the capabilities that we have. So we're the first intelligent species to cross some interesting kind of threshold. So to me, that makes us seem like we're near the bottom of the scale of possible intelligences, because we just hit that space where we can create a civilization, and above that there's probably a vast variety of possible intelligences. It's silly to think that every possible intelligence will be as smart as us. I think that in the same way that we're qualitatively smarter than chimps, it's possible there'll be intelligence qualitatively smarter than us. And especially when you think about the numbers involved of, like, say an AI is able to greatly increase its processing power in its brain to the point where it's maybe 1,000 times more processing, organized as effectively as a human brain. Like, those two elements are important, like organizing the algorithms effectively and having the brute computational power. So if you think about like an AI that could copy itself across like 1,000 computers, maybe an AI is born on a supercomputer that costs like $1 million. Eventually, it will be able to process a lot more. And a human's like prefrontal cortex is only like 4 or 5 times larger than a chimp's, and that resulted in us getting general intelligence. So if you created a virtual machine with a quote prefrontal cortex that was maybe 1,000 times greater, then I'd expect it to be qualitatively smarter than us very quickly. And if you run the numbers of a AI like taking off and improving itself and the likely computational resources it will have access to, it's plausible that it won't just stick around the human level. Like, if humans could instantly make babies like daily and bring them up and make not just babies but copies of themselves that are as intelligent as them with all the skills they had, then we would probably have the capability to become super intelligent too. But that's like what we have with AI. Is an analogy is like a human that can copy themselves indefinitely. An AI could use computers to copy itself and build more computers and copy itself much faster and improve its capabilities by directly editing its source code much faster than human beings can. Like, our brain is locked off. If we try to mess with it, like, we get brain damage or we go insane. We don't know how to do that. But an AI will be able to have the capability of understanding its own code and improving it, which is a capability that we've never seen on this planet before. So it's kind of unpredictable. And I think that it's prudent to assume that such minds could become extremely smart fast by human standards, especially since they could also accelerate their thinking speed. So there are a lot of reasons why I think that superhuman AI would quickly follow human level AI in an intelligence explosion.
What convergent outcomes in the future do you think will increase the likelihood of a singularity?
Let's see. The first is money. You can make a lot of money if you are able to create machines that do what humans want, and that is the cutting edge of the economy right now. Is software and autonomous systems and things that can handle massive amounts of data that we're creating. And if you look at Wall Street trading, it's mostly done by algorithms, and the margins are so thin. Like, so much money is traded in the world of finance that if you can improve your returns by a fraction of a percent, it might be worth many thousands or even millions of dollars to get that capability. So I think that in addition to military systems and industrial automation, there are so many industries that are demanding of intelligent machines and intelligent software. So unless we destroy all of our computers, I think that there's a tremendous pressure towards artificial intelligence and eventually a singularity.
So, doesn't AI need to be conscious to have human-like intentionality or other types of consciousness, or in order to achieve intelligence, or in order to achieve the level of intelligence required by a singularity, does it need self-reflection?
I think that an AI would need self-reflection in the sense of being able to reflect on itself. But whether that necessarily goes hand in hand with what we consider like phenomenal consciousness is a very open question. And anyone that professes to know the answer one way or the other is wrong. And the reason why is because we haven't done the experiments yet. We have not built intelligent machines with intentionality. We have not gotten to the level of even being able to really try because we haven't, our computers haven't been fast enough, and we haven't had any theories of intelligence that have taken much ground. So people might say that AI will never happen. It usually seems to be through like intuitions about the uniqueness of human consciousness and spirit or something. And I don't think those terms are meaningless. I think that they have their place, but I see a lot of defensiveness oftentimes when people they assert the importance of consciousness. It seems to me that human like specialness in the sense of like metaphysical importance and spiritual cosmic importance keeps being changed when we discover new things in science. So there's a strong attachment to an old idea of consciousness and intentionality and spirit that's out of date, but a lot of people are holding on to because it's traditional. And there aren't easy questions. If you discard that traditional model, it can be challenging to find new explanations that are satisfying. But that's what causal functionalists and people in cognitive science have done. And I think that while consciousness is interesting, it's likely that we don't know. We just have to experiment. If we don't experiment, we're just sitting in our armchair, and armchair thought can only get so far.
Excellent. So this question's about the potential benefits, the opportunities, and the potential risks or disasters that could come about through building greater than human level intelligence or an intelligence explosion. So it's up to you. You can either talk about them separately, or you can talk about them together. So what are the potential benefits and risks, if you want to address them both at the same time?
All right. So if we look at the other species in the genus Homo, they aren't around anymore, and there were a variety of them at one point: Homo florensis, Homo neanderthalis, and the evidence is extremely strong that our subspecies or our species wiped out these other evolutionary siblings of ours, and looking at that, and that's happened so many times in the course of evolutionary history, where one species just outcompeted another and they went extinct. Like, I believe it's 99% of all species that have ever lived on this planet are now extinct. So that's the default. Your prior probability estimation of the survival of a species should be low. And while it seems like human beings have done a lot and have taken over the planet, there have probably been. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be the dominant species on this planet forever. So when you look at us creating more intelligent species and you observe the fact that the reason why we outcompeted our evolutionary siblings and why we can do basically whatever we want and we're the most powerful species on Earth, the reason why is because of intelligence, not because we're stronger or have any of like a special venom or anything, but because we have intelligence. So if you look at that intelligence is what gives us our power, and you observe how many times in history species have replaced one another, and then you hypothesize us creating a new intelligent species, then there's room for concern. There's room to be worried about it. And I think that, unfortunately, the worry is what jumps to mind first. And so I think that there's a risk that we could be displaced by smarter than human intelligence. And it could be slowly, it could be quickly. But I'm optimistic, and I hope there's other solutions and proposals for avoiding this possibility. And I think that we should pursue them. And one of the proposed solutions is Ray Kurzweil's idea that we'll merge together with our machines. I wish that it could be that easy, but I'm skeptical that we'll be able to merge with the most powerful artificial intelligences after a certain period of time. It could be like a person trying to drink from Niagara Falls, because biological tissue can only process information so quickly. So hooking a human being up to a extremely intelligent AI might be like throwing a drop of water into Niagara Falls. They'll be like, well, your consciousness is merged with this machine, but who's really doing all the work? The machine. So at some point, I think that we'll have to actually, oh no, we'll have to trust the artificial intelligence. Like this is the leap of the challenge that people shrink away from. Like we have to trust a machine. Yeah, I don't see any other choice because eventually machines are going to be more intelligent than any biological organism, and we have to build machines that we can trust. And one possibility is to copy the brain of humans we trust into machines, and let them self-improve before we let any other artificial intelligence self-improve. So maybe you could have like a worldwide search for the 10 most trustworthy and benevolent people on the planet. Um, I'm but I'm also skeptical that that would actually work because I think that even the most benevolent people, if they're given too much power, I think that we're programmed to stop noticing the little guy. It doesn't necessarily have to be outright malevolence, but I'm untrustworthy of human beings because I think that we're fundamentally built to serve ourselves and our tribe. And when you're talking about the power of superintelligence, like if you're just helping your tribe or you have any bias whatsoever, then it'll be magnified many times. So I think that we need to build intellects that are more benevolent than any human being that has ever lived. So in the same sense of superintelligence, I think it needs to be coupled with what I'd maybe call super morality or super benevolence. And people might say, "Oh, that's impossible because all entities are selfish." But like the way I see intelligence and the brain is a series of programs connected together, and there are certain pieces of mental software that account for our selfishness. And if we can remove those and create an entity that's stably benevolent and has no reason not to be, and make that the first superintelligence, then I think that is our safest way to get through this challenge. And accomplishing that feat is a challenge, but I think that it's the best option. I'm skeptical that we'll choose to upload human beings and make those the first superintelligences because I think we'll be able to create artificial intelligence before we can upload people. So I think that whether we like it or not, we're pretty much forced to make AI that's friendly to human beings. And if there are other suggestions, I'd love to hear them. And I'm constantly thinking about other suggestions. But after thinking about this for a good length of time, I've come to the conclusion that we're pretty much forced to figure out how to build benevolent artificial intelligence that is launches into an intelligence explosion. And I think that if we create a being that wants to stay benevolent as it improves itself, then we could win out. We could create a being that is kind to humans and also gives us enough freedom to evolve into post-humanity. And I just think that it's worth trying to do. And it's a long trip to achieve this. It could be 50 years, it could be 100 years. I don't know, but I think it's worth looking at.
So, I mean, a lot of the reason why humans and other species have wiped out other species is because it's the Darwinistic natural selection that we evolved into. And so we have our own cognitive biases and we have the darker sides of human nature that we need to deal with every day. So I agree that we shouldn't be sort of the first smarter than human intelligence shouldn't be like suddenly boosting a person or like a violent animal like a chimp. But how do you suppose that we'll achieve benevolent superintelligence? Do we work it out theoretically first and not do any of the development, or do we do a bit of development and stage that, or how do you think the right roadmap to benevolent superintelligence is?
I think that we should have a mix of the two, of theory and development. There are certain basic pieces of theory that need to be developed before we can even start in any meaningful sense. Um, AI, by the standard of human level intelligence and recursive self improvement and generally intelligent AI, I think we're at a pretty primitive stage. Even though we have AIs that can drive cars and win Jeopardy, I still think that we're at least 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 years away from true AI. And we don't even have a decision theory that has a like variable for taking into account the decision process itself. Like all decision theories that have been formulated mathematically are fundamentally dualist. Like there's me and the environment. That's the way that they work. And the environment is like a series of bits that gets processed through this decision system. And there's no room in the mathematics for recursion or self-analysis or self-evaluation. And in that sense, all mathematical decision theories are very robotic. And for true intelligence, we're going to want something that can handle recursion, that can handle self-reflection. And it's hard to say, how do we build a utility function that's benevolent? It's hard to specify that content until we know the cognitive algorithms and the cognitive engine that's running that content. So it's kind of like both fields need to proceed together, like the decision theory and the algorithms of intelligence, and the benevolence, how do we specify the utility function part. Right now, we're at extremely early stage. We don't even know how to specify utility functions that value things in the world. We only know how to build utility functions that maximize reward signals. There's so much we don't know. And I think that through like alternating cycles of development and theory, there'll be many, many alternating cycles, and that will need to take place for many, many years before we can reach true artificial intelligence.
So, if we did build a utility function that wouldn't just maximize reward signals, but instead value things in the real world around it, do you think then it could reprogram itself with these values, even if it needed to update its own utility function without turning sort of hostile or more likely indifferent to us?
Right. In thinking about like a super intelligent AI modifying its own utility function, I like to keep in mind that the entire superintelligence of the agent will be brought to bear on carefully controlling its own self-modification of its utility function. So if its utility function is what it fundamentally values, then it will try as best as it can to preserve its own utility function, or if it does modify its utility function, modify it in a way that's predictable, where its modifications actually result in modifying the utility function in the way that it intended. So if we think about an AI changing its utility function to keep up with the subtleties of the world, like if we build super intelligences, we don't want them to be, quote, robotic. We want them to be able to respond intelligently and empathically and with wisdom to changing human and post-human needs, demands, and values. So we don't want to build a machine that has a dogmatic utility function that doesn't ever change. Maybe we want a machine that isn't really even an agent in the world in the usual sense. It might even be like more merged with the environment rather than an agent in the world. It could be something that's more in the background rather than the foreground. Um, it's because it seems that human beings don't like other agents interfering with us that much. So a artificial intelligence that's built to coexist with human beings probably wouldn't intervene in our lives too much, or it would by definition probably not be a very friendly artificial intelligence. So human entities and maybe a wide variety of entities value freedom. And freedom, if an AI doesn't respect freedom, then it's an AI that we don't want. So, I think that an artificial intelligence will need to carefully modify its utility function based on feedback from other entities. Maybe an artificial intelligence could even split its intellect into like 10 different intelligences, and they could all debate or run simulations or have debates and interactions with wider groups of entities outside of itself, and basically behave like a wise human being or even a wise human collective would. There's a lot of options that we could take advantage of with artificial intelligence. And if we don't trust an artificial intelligence as much as we trust the most trustworthy humans, then it's unethical to build one because you're releasing something onto the world that could be a disaster. But if you do have an artificial intelligence that is clearly has the wisdom and morality and subtlety and ability to deal with complex situations in a way that impresses everyone, if you have that kind of artificial intelligence, then I think you'd be improving the world by letting it loose. And that's a high bar to reach, and it's a bar that must be reached, or AI shouldn't be built.
So how do you make sure that a super intelligence is not built by somebody with the wrong motives, or maybe just not the motives which are refined enough to understand the complexities of the issues around building an AI?
Well, if you build an AI that, so you said, can you
So,
repeat
so
that
I'm
question?
asking, so I'm asking, like, let's just say there's plenty of interested parties with economic motives. This is just a scenario. Remember, you mentioned first mover advantages, like the if somebody built a super artificial intelligence that would be able to operate differently and high and above all the others, then it may be able to make the engineers of it or the sponsors of it very rich. That's just a scenario. There are other reasons why someone would build an AI, right? But okay. So how do you stop people from following these motives to build an AI, and recognize the dangers involved? How can you make sure that it's not going to be built by somebody with either unrefined understandings of the potential threats of that would occur by building a super intelligence, or just with the complete wrong motives?
Right. I think that um, we can't. The people that care about this aren't going to win out by any kind of brute force or trying to like make demands of other people. I think that we need to appeal to the reason and to the conscience of the people that are working on artificial intelligence. I think that we need to make uh, careful, step by step, well cited, well supported arguments in favor of our our current positions, and that's the only way where we'll be able to get people working on AI to care about it. And so on the plus side, a lot of people that think about AGI, artificial general intelligence, in detail, a lot of them are aware of these issues and take them pretty seriously. And that includes artificial intelligence researchers that aren't associated with the Singularity Institute at all. The AAAI, the American Association for Artificial Intelligence, held I think it was a 1 day symposium on the question of intelligence explosion. So it's on the radar of mainstream AI. Peter Norvig, who used to be at Google, the director of search quality for Google, he has spoken at Singularity Summit. He's aware of the issues. We've talked to the people that created Watson, at IBM. We've talked to people at Google that are working on artificial intelligence. We've talked to people in laboratories and universities all over the world. We're having open dialogue among artificial intelligence researchers. We want to continue that dialogue. And just in the same way that the scientists that built the atom bomb had a responsibility to think about the ethics of what they were doing, people that are working towards human level artificial intelligence have a profound responsibility to consider the consequences of their work. And this is how all scientists should be. All scientists, all people that build technological artifacts should pay attention to the outcome of their work. And this is no different. And the stakes are really high because of the potential power of artificial intelligence. And we hope to talk to more people about the importance of safety and just do our best.
Yeah, to be honest, like I've often, uh, when talking about these sorts of things with some people, maybe they're not the people building the AIs, but just interested, just people who are interested in learning and knowledge and intellect. I sometimes get a sort of eerie hush of indifference because there seems to be a whole heap of other things that people are worrying about, which to them have quite a higher level of need to be thought about. So, like for instance, there's global warming, and there's peak oil, and there's the financial crisis and things like that. How do we get AI on the radar? How do we communicate to people that these are really important things to think about?
I think that we shouldn't force it too hard because if people don't care, like some arguments can be made to them. Their AI is in the news at least in a big way, like at least once a year, if not two, three, four times a year. Like Siri on the new iPhone, everyone knows about that. It was from a AI project called Calo, CALO, Cognitive Assistant that learns and organizes. It's been under development for almost a decade, if not longer, until it made it to Siri. So people know about that. People know about Watson winning in Jeopardy. So there are plenty of opportunities for many hundreds of millions of people to reflect on artificial intelligence. And every milestone in AI that results in smarter programs makes it surprises more people and gets more people thinking about the issues. So I think that people have every right to focus on global warming, peak oil, other issues facing humanity, social justice, um, water rights, disease. There's a lot of things in the world that demand people's attention, and as long as it's even a rare step to take the step of genuinely caring about global issues at all. Most people just focus on their lives and their immediate needs and their family and close and loved ones and a few close friends, and that's most of their life, and that's just the way most people operate. But among those people that do genuinely care about greater issues, not in the sense of fitting in with a certain social group, but genuinely investigating the underlying causes and doing research about which issues are most important, we're offering this artificial intelligence as an issue that worthy of your attention. And we have arguments for why we think this is a big deal. You can look up the Singularity Institute website, read our concise overview of what we do and why we care about artificial intelligence, and we just offer it out there. We know that true AI isn't just around the corner, opinions vary, but we did a poll of our staff, and the median response was around like 2040, 2045, 2050, that area. I think I actually was even a little more pessimistic, thinking more like 2050, 2060. So it's not right around the corner, but it could change the world so utterly that even if it were a few hundred years away, I think that anyone who cares about long-term issues on this planet should care about AI. Like global warming is important, but I think that this is actually a more immediate concern. If ocean levels rise by a few inches over the next century, that's not a big deal in comparison to creating a new intelligent species. And I think that once more people see AI as plausible, which happens every day, once they see that true AI, strong AI, human level or greater AI is plausible, then they will start caring about this issue. And I actually think it's inevitable that many people will eventually care about it because they'll be interacting with intelligent programs every day, and it's already beginning with smartphones and apps, and it'll only get more intense. So I think that more people will care about it one way or the other. It's just a matter of time.
One of the concerns that I've had is often in the face of danger we respond very quickly and sometimes efficiently, but often there are risks associated with how we respond. If we had a global warming crisis and we really needed to a better way of predicting weather or where the next massive tornado would hit or where the next tidal wave would come along, and just a bunch of sensors didn't really cut the cake. What if people decided to do a massive effort into building an AI in response to a looming threat, rather than just an economic one?
I think that people won't take it seriously until all the important events like I don't think that people in society in general will take this seriously until all the important events have already transpired, and the outcome is already predetermined. That's just my view of the matter. I've never seen a mass movement that didn't react to something after it happened, rather than I've never seen a mass movement that that could respond to something that goes against traditional ideas so gratingly. Like the concept of human level AI challenges human specialists in a way that clashes directly with not only Judeo-Christian concepts of intelligence and the mind, but basic, like what people consider common sense, is that a machine will never reach human level. And I think by the time that's clearly demonstrated, the fight for the future, so to say, will already be over. And I just we're so far away from the possibility of like Congress discussing artificial intelligence. Maybe I'm just pessimistic about that. I think that even if there were a mass movement, it would eventually come down to the people programming the artificial intelligences. So I think I would like to see a larger movement towards this and more people contributing money and resources to getting artificial intelligence that's benevolent built. I'd like to see more attention toward that, but I think that it'll likely be a small group of at most a few tens of thousands of people, or maybe 100,000 by the time we reach actually advanced artificial intelligence. I just think that's how it'll most likely go down.
Okay. Well, let's hope that people do not react to massive change and then try and build a benevolent AI as a knee-jerk response to some sort of catastrophe. But yeah, that's been really good. Is there anything else that you'd like to add as a conclusion to the interview?
Yeah. Or I'd like to mention like why I consider superintelligence interesting, like in a more personal sense, which is that we all human beings were born with a certain set of mental hardware that we didn't really choose. It's kind of like some libertarians like feel indignant at that they were born into a social contract with a state that they didn't choose, and I think that in a more profound sense, I'm indignant that I've been born into a mental contract that I didn't choose. Like, I'm just like any other human male in that I have like aggressive thoughts and I can think ill of people, or I can be calloused, or I can be stupid, or I can be selfish, or I can be biased. And it's this, and as far as I know, unless there's a perfect human on this earth, everyone's pretty much the same. And I'm sick of that. I'm sick of not being able to actually want what I want to want. I'm sick of I don't feel that my brain is mine. I feel that it was built by evolution to make babies, pretty much, and protect a tribe and increase my own status. And it's that way by necessity because my ancestors had to be like that in order to make enough to make an unbroken chain of offspring that led to me. And maybe that's the way the brain has to be in a harsh world, but I'd like to see a world that's not that where if harshness exists, then it's from our own choice, not because it's universally imposed on everyone. And I think that there's a lot of beauty to be explored in the possibility of different forms of thinking. And we should explore, like, what if we had a visual cortex that could intuitively process ultraviolet light and infrared light? Then we could create works of art that span across the entire visual spectrum. Or maybe what if we created a part of our brain that could visualize 8-dimensional objects? Then maybe we could create 8-dimensional works of art or 8-dimensional virtual spaces. And so many possibilities are opened up by this mind space explosion as I see it. And in comparison, like the ability to manufacture whatever physical products you want is trivial. Like if I had the ability to instantly create whatever I wanted, okay, maybe I'd create like some mansion in the countryside and I'd create myself like a sports car and maybe even a spaceship, you know? And I'd be like, oh, I have a spaceship, that's awesome. And maybe like in a week I'd be like, okay, now what next, you know? And I think there's a limited amount of excitement and beauty to be gained in the physical and the external. There's a lot more to be gained in exploring intelligence and interacting with different intelligences. I think that's where the future lies, and that is why I want to contribute towards creating new and better and different and interesting forms of intelligence and facilitate a society where all these intelligences can coexist and expand to colonize the universe and explore the cosmos and the universe of possibilities in the mind.
Excellent. Look, it's been a pleasure. It's so glad to speak to you and do this interview. It's been incredibly insightful. I've learned, a few different ways of thinking about things just by, listening to you just then. Very impressed. So thank you very much for spending the time, Michael. Yeah,
Thank you, Adam.
I look
It was
forward to further progress with the Singularity Institute and the more papers that come out and stuff. So I'm looking forward to it. But I'll put this up on YouTube and I'll just leave
cool.
it there.
Great. Thanks.